Hi there. Now, John Ousterhout, the author of the book A Philosophy of Software Design, talks about defining or taking error out of existence. Now, this is a very good design principle that you can think of when you're building your own programming systems. But the thing is, he gives an example of Java substring method, which I feel is wrong. The reason is the substring method returns a substring of a string within depending upon the index range that you send out. For example, if you have a word hello and you say uh, get me the substring for the word hello from 0 to 4, it will just return hello. But if you return 0 to 3, then it will return hell. So that is how the substring method works. Now, the thing is, if you give an invalid range, for example, you say I want the string hello to get a substring from 0 to 7 characters. In that scenario, it doesn't have 7 characters. So as per Java, it will throw an index out of array exception. Now, this makes sense in Java world, but John Ousterhout says that this should not be the case. Like Java should follow what like Go or Python does, where it returns an empty string. So if you give 0 to 7 for the string hello, the Python and Go would just return hello as a string. It will ignore the last two characters. Well, that's a good approach to have, but consider this scenario. If you give two negative numbers to that substring method, it will return an empty string. Now, what that does is you have a big processing logic that's happening, and somewhere in this logic you put this substring method, and you have tests to ensure that the substring method works and all. But the substring does not return an exception, and it will just return an empty string. Now, if you're a smart developer, you would write code to handle this, which means you're actually writing code to handle an error edge case scenario, which might never happen. But you, as a smart developer, you want to be safe, so you will try to write code to handle it. But that is precisely the point that we are trying to avoid. We don't want to write additional code. Just because sending an empty string, now we have to add additional code just to handle that particular scenario. Now, if you're not a smart developer, you might miss reading that documentation. What that would do is your processing will continue in your code and it will fail at some point down at a later point of time. Now, if this goes into production or even if in your testing, it's going to be very hard for you to debug that because the exception it will some exception that not related to the actual issue, which means you need to trace back the entire stack to find out where the substring method is used and where it got turned into an empty string. Now, that's a painful process. So having the index out of array exception, what that does is it will throw an exception immediately. So even if you miss handling it, you will get the array exception very quickly and it will exactly show where that is happening. So what that does is you just need to figure out why the substring went out of range in that particular scenario, and you can actually quickly resolve that issue. Now what this does is you have actually found a bug and was able to resolve that bug very fast because Java sent that index out of bound exception. So having said that, now the design principle of taking the error out of the equation, or removing the errors from the application, is a very good design principle that is recommended to follow, and I fully support that. But the thing is, you need to understand in what scenarios it could be implemented. You cannot really blindly put that out. You cannot blindly put in a scenario where you are actually hiding a bug because of trying to implementing this scenario. So one of the example that you could have is like you have a API call which calls another third-party API, and when you call the third-party API, it might return an error. Now, from a business standpoint, even if that API returns an error, business is not going to get affected. If business, it's if it gives a response back, it's well and good. But if it doesn't give a response back, from a business perspective, it doesn't make any difference. In that scenario, it makes sense to define that error out of existence. You just now mask that error, not mask, but basically you absorb the error and you continue your processing so that the business is not affected. Now, this is a valid scenario where you can implement this design pattern. But in other scenario, for example, the substring, I think it's a bug at that point of time. So that's all for me. Now, before you go, I'm launching a new meetup group for software design enthusiasts where I'll be talking about similar scenarios or concepts which would help you in implementing better software design. Now, if you're interested, reach out to me and I will give you the details. Thank you. Bye.